On the night of December 24th, 1978, 4 members of a single family stepped out of a darkened house on a gravel road in northern Alabama and began moving from door to door. By sunrise on Christmas morning, 9 of their neighbors were dead across a stretch of road shorter than half a mile. The houses were intact. The doors were unlocked. No money was taken. No message was left behind. The perpetrators were not criminals, not a gang, not extremists, not fugitives. They were the Carter family, a father and his 3 sons, a household known for keeping to itself, never claiming authority, never seeking conflict, never appearing on any police radar. State authorities would later describe the event as a spontaneous family collapse. Locals still call it something else entirely, the Alabama Christmas Massacre. But the cause wasn't drugs, wasn't money, wasn't a long-standing feud. It began with something so small it seemed harmless at the time. A Christmas tree taken from the wrong house, in the wrong winter, by someone who never imagined what they were setting in motion. What followed was not madness, but silence, pride, and a sequence of decisions. No one stopped in time. Before we continue with the video, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and what time it is there. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. By the first week of December 1978, northern Alabama was already quiet in a way that felt heavier than usual. The factories in and around Huntsville had slowed for the holidays. Textile shifts were being cut short, and the radio stations leaned hard into Christmas playlists weeks ahead of schedule. AM dials crackled with Conway Twitty and Merle Haggard between sermons and weather reports. At night, frost settled on the red clay like a thin white skin, and porch lights stayed on longer than they should have. In rural Limestone County, Christmas was not a season. It was a signal, a marker that told people what side of the year they were on, who still had work, who didn't, and who owed whom favors before winter deepened its grip. Families measured stability in small ways. A full oil tank, a freezer with venison, a tree standing upright in the living room. The Carter family lived on the edge of a gravel road that dead-ended near a patch of pine woods owned by the county. Their house was a single-story structure built in the early 1950s, wood frame, cinder block foundation, patched over the years with mismatched boards and aluminum siding scavenged from demolition sites. It sat low, almost crouched, as if trying to disappear into the land. The Carters were not newcomers. They had been there long enough to be ignored, which in that part of Alabama was a kind of acceptance. Harold Carter, the father, worked intermittently as a maintenance hand at a poultry processing plant until layoffs became permanent. His wife, Ruth, cleaned homes when work was available. They had 3 adult sons who moved in and out of the house as jobs appeared and vanished. Thomas, the oldest, recently back from a failed attempt to find work in Birmingham. Earl, who had never left. And Daniel, the youngest, quiet, observant, recently discharged from the National Guard. The neighbors knew the Carters in fragments. A truck that didn't move for weeks, a dog that barked too long, raised voices that traveled across the cold air at night. No one knew what happened inside the house, and no one asked. In December of 1978, Alabama was still recovering from the long economic hangover of the early 70s. The oil crisis had hit rural communities unevenly, and places like Limestone County felt forgotten by both Montgomery and Washington. Trust in institutions was thin. People relied on family, church, and memory. When something went wrong, it was handled close to home. That year, Christmas trees became a problem. The county had issued a notice in the local paper, small print on page 6, that cutting trees from public land was prohibited. Violators would be fined. The notice went mostly unread. For decades, families had cut pines from those woods without issue. It was understood, not written. But in late November, the sheriff's department had begun cracking down. 2 citations were issued. 1 tree was confiscated from a pickup truck parked outside a grocery store. Word traveled fast, and resentment traveled faster. On December 3rd, a Sunday afternoon, the Carters' living room stood empty of decoration. No tree, no lights. Ruth Carter had mentioned it once, quietly, while folding laundry. Harold said nothing. Thomas left the room. Earl stared at the television, the sound turned down, watching a football game he didn't care about. That evening, Daniel walked the gravel road alone. He passed houses already glowing with colored bulbs and aluminum stars. He noticed the scent of pine drifting through the cold air, fresh and sharp. At the edge of the county woods, he stopped. Later, no one could say exactly what happened next, only that a tree appeared in the Carter living room sometime before midnight. It was not tall, barely 6 feet, sparse branches, uneven, cut hastily, but it stood upright in a rusted metal stand, filled with sand. For the first time that season, the house smelled like Christmas. The next morning, Ruth strung a single line of white lights. She didn't plug them in. By December 10th, the tree was gone. Not fallen, not knocked over. Gone. The stand remained. Sand spilled across the linoleum. A few needles clung to the floor near the doorway, pressed into the surface by heavy boots. No one in the house said the word stolen, but everyone understood it. In rural Alabama, theft carried a specific weight. It wasn't about value, it was about message, about boundaries crossed without permission, about being seen as weak. Harold Carter drove the gravel road that afternoon, stopping at 3 houses within a quarter mile. He asked calmly, polite. Each neighbor denied knowing anything. Some looked genuinely confused. One laughed, thinking it was a joke. At the 4th house, a woman said she had seen headlights late Saturday night near the Carter's place. She couldn't say whose. Everyone had headlights. By dusk, the story had spread. A Christmas tree had been taken. Whispers formed theories quickly. Kids, drunks, a prank gone wrong. But among the men who gathered at the gas station that night, the tone sharpened. You don't take from your neighbors. The Carters did not call the sheriff. That omission mattered later. Inside the house, something shifted. The loss of the tree became larger than the tree itself. It stood in for months of humiliation, for bills unpaid, for work denied, for the quiet condescension that settled over families like theirs. Thomas talked about respect. Earl talked about teaching lessons. Daniel said very little, but he cleaned his rifle that night. December 15th brought a cold front that dropped temperatures into the low 20s. Pipes froze, roads iced, people stayed inside, church attendance dipped. On December 17th, a new tree appeared 2 houses down, taller, fuller, decorated with red bows. The family living there had children. Their windows glowed late into the night. Someone noticed. By the week of Christmas, 9 houses along that gravel road were marked in quiet ways. A porch light left on, a truck parked crooked, a laugh heard too late at night. Nothing official, nothing written, just observations. On December 24th, 1978, as families across Limestone County gathered around dinner tables and televisions, the Carter house remained dark. No lights, no tree. The smell of pine had long faded. What remained was something colder. And before dawn broke on Christmas morning, 9 neighbors would be dead, not because of money, not because of drugs, not because of long-standing feuds, but because in that winter of 1978, a single act crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. And no one had been listening when the warnings came quietly, weeks before, carried on cold air, and ignored. In Limestone County, people noticed changes before they named them. A truck idling too long, a porch light that stayed off when it usually stayed on. The absence of small, expected rituals carried more meaning than open confrontation ever did. After the tree disappeared from the Carter house, the gravel road adjusted itself around the silence. Neighbors still waved, still nodded, but conversations shortened. Doors closed faster. Children were called inside earlier than usual. No one connected these actions to the Carter family out loud, but instinct did the work words avoided. The Carters stopped attending church. That alone drew attention. In 1978 Alabama, church attendance was less about belief than visibility. Absence raised questions no one wanted answered. Harold Carter had attended Mount Olive Baptist for nearly 20 years. He sat in the same pew, sang without volume, left immediately after service. When he stopped showing up, people noticed. Ruth Carter stopped cleaning houses that week. She told one woman she was sick, told another the truck wouldn't start. Neither was true. Inside the Carter home, routines hardened. Meals were eaten in silence. The radio stayed off. The television remained muted even when it was on. Thomas spent hours outside the house, walking the perimeter of the property, cigarette after cigarette burning down to the filter. Earl began sleeping during the day. Daniel wrote letters he never mailed. The absence of the tree became a daily reference point. Every empty corner of the living room drew the eye back to where it had stood. Ruth swept the needles into a jar and placed it in a cabinet beneath the sink. No one questioned why. On December 12th, the sheriff's department received an anonymous call reporting suspicious behavior near the county woods. The caller said someone had been cutting trees late at night earlier that month. No names were given. No follow-up occurred. Records later showed the call was logged and dismissed. The deputies had bigger concerns. Drunk driving spiked during the holidays. Domestic disputes rose. Resources were thin. Limestone County had fewer than 20 full-time deputies that winter, spread across hundreds of square miles. No one was assigned to check on the Carter family. On December 14th, Thomas Carter drove to Athens and purchased ammunition, 30 cartridges, 2 boxes, paid cash. The clerk asked if he was going hunting. Thomas nodded. No record was kept. Firearms were common, questions were not. That same day, Earl borrowed a friend's pickup truck. He said he needed to haul scrap metal. The truck was returned empty. No scrap was ever sold. Daniel visited an army surplus store off Highway 72. He bought gloves, a canvas jacket, nothing unusual. Individually, none of it stood out. Together, it formed a pattern that would only become visible in hindsight. The neighbors noticed smaller things. One woman recalled seeing Thomas standing in her yard late one evening, just beyond the property line, staring at her porch light. She assumed he was drunk. She locked her door and forgot about it. Another neighbor remembered hearing footsteps on her gravel driveway after midnight. She assumed it was a stray dog. A man 2 houses down heard his gate latch open and close without explanation. He fixed it the next morning and said nothing. In December, fear rarely announces itself. It arrives quietly, disguised as inconvenience. On December 18th, Daniel Carter attended a Christmas event at a nearby VFW hall. He sat alone, drank 1 beer, left early. A man later recalled that Daniel spent most of the evening watching people's hands. No one asked why. Back on the gravel road, decorations multiplied. Inflatable Santas, plastic reindeer, strings of lights wrapped tightly around porch railings. The road glowed at night, visible from a distance. The Carter house remained dark. Harold Carter stopped driving altogether. His truck stayed parked beside the house, dust settling on the windshield. When neighbors passed, they saw movement inside, but no lights after sunset. The absence became conspicuous. On December 20th, a boy from one of the nearby houses claimed someone had followed him home from the bus stop. His mother dismissed it as imagination. 2 days later, a dog went missing, then another. By December 23rd, tension had settled into the road like a second frost. Conversation stopped entirely. People locked doors earlier. Guns were cleaned quietly in kitchens and garages. Not out of fear, but habit. No one imagined what was coming. The Carters did not speak of plans. There was no written list, no recorded conversation. Later investigations found no letters, no diaries, no explicit threats. What existed was something harder to document: shared certainty. In families like the Carters, decisions did not require debate. They formed through proximity, repetition, and grievance. Each small slight added weight until the outcome felt inevitable. The stolen tree became proof that their neighbors felt entitled to take from them, proof that the Carters existed outside the protection of community norms, proof that no authority would intervene. In that vacuum, judgment became internal. On the night of December 23rd, the Carters ate together for the first time in weeks. Cornbread, beans, salt pork, a simple meal. Ruth said grace longer than usual. No one remembers the words. After dinner, Harold unlocked a cabinet that hadn't been opened in years. Inside were firearms wrapped in oil-stained cloth, old hunting rifles, a shotgun with a cracked stock, ammunition stored loosely in coffee cans. Nothing modern, nothing illegal. Tools passed down, not purchased for what they were about to do. Thomas checked each weapon methodically. Earl tested the weight. Daniel cleaned 1 rifle again, though it had already been cleaned twice that week. There was no talk of Christmas. Outside, the road lay quiet under a thin layer of ice. Lights flickered through windows. Televisions glowed. Laughter drifted faintly through the cold air. At one house, a Christmas tree stood in the front window, clearly visible from the road. No one inside noticed the Carter house door open briefly just after midnight. No one noticed 4 figures step into the darkness. The massacre would later be described as sudden, chaotic, senseless. But in truth, it had been forming for weeks, built slowly, silently. 1 small boundary crossed, 1 grievance left unanswered, and a community that mistook quiet for peace. By the time Christmas morning arrived, the road would look the same as it always had, but nothing on it would ever be ordinary again. The first call reached the Limestone County Sheriff's Department at 6:14 a.m. The dispatcher logged it as a possible disturbance. A woman, voice shaking, reported gunshots on a rural road near the county woods. She could not give a precise address. She said it sounded like hunting, but wrong. She said it had been going on for a while. By the time a patrol unit was dispatched, the road had already gone silent. Christmas morning in 1978 moved slowly. Frost covered windshields. Churches prepared for abbreviated services. Families slept in after late nights. Radios played softly in kitchens, voices low, respectful of the day. On the gravel road, the first body was found by a man stepping outside to start his truck. He did not see the blood at first. He saw the door hanging open, then the stillness inside the house, then the shape on the floor that refused to make sense. He ran. Deputies arrived at 6:41 a.m. What they found unfolded house by house. At the first residence, 2 adults lay in the living room, shot at close range, no signs of forced entry. The television was still on. A plate of food sat untouched on the table. At the second house, a man was found near the back door, 1 shoe missing. as if he had been trying to leave. He had been shot once. At the third, a woman was found in her bedroom. She had not heard the others. By 7:30 a.m., the road was sealed off. State troopers were called in. Word traveled fast despite the holiday. 9 neighbors were dead across 5 houses. There was no pattern in age or gender, no robbery, no vandalism, no message left behind. Cash remained untouched. Jewelry stayed in place. Vehicles sat where they had been parked the night before. It did not look like a crime of gain. Investigators struggled to define it. Shell casings littered the road and yards, but there was no single weapon type. Rifles, shotguns, multiple calibers. Some shots were fired from outside, others from within arm's length. The absence of panic surprised deputies. Doors were unlocked, curtains open, lights on. People had not been expecting violence. At 8:02 a.m., a deputy knocked on the Carter house door. There was no answer. The door was unlocked. Inside, the house was empty. Beds were made, dishes washed. The cabinet that had held the firearms stood open, empty. The jar of pine needles beneath the sink remained untouched. No note was found. Outside, the Carter truck was gone. At 9:15 a.m., a state trooper found the truck abandoned near a creek bed 3 miles away. The vehicle had been wiped down. Inside, mud tracked across the floorboard suggested 4 sets of boots. Nearby, deputies recovered 2 rifles wrapped in cloth, partially submerged in the creek. A shotgun was later found buried beneath leaves further downstream. Ballistics would later confirm they matched the scene. The Carters were missing. By mid-morning, news stations interrupted holiday programming. Multiple homicides in Limestone County scrolled across television screens. Reporters speculated. Rumors raced ahead of facts. Church services were canceled. Families locked their doors. Search teams fanned out across the woods. Helicopters circled. Dogs followed trails that ended abruptly near the water. At 2:47 p.m., a farmer found Harold Carter's body in a shed on his property. He had taken his own life. Less than a mile away, Thomas and Earl Carter were found near the county line, dead from gunshot wounds determined to be self-inflicted. Daniel Carter was found just before sunset, sitting against a pine tree at the edge of the woods. His rifle lay beside him. He had died hours earlier. There were no final words, no confessions, no explanation offered. By nightfall, the story had already begun to harden into something simpler than reality allowed. A family snapped, a Christmas gone wrong, an isolated tragedy, but investigators knew better. They catalogued evidence, interviewed neighbors, reconstructed timelines. What emerged was not madness, but escalation. The theft of a Christmas tree was confirmed through witness statements. One neighbor admitted, after hours of questioning, that his teenage son had taken it as a joke. He had planned to return it. He never did. That fact would not appear in the first news reports. In official records, motive was listed as personal grievance. 9 neighbors were buried in the week that followed. Funerals overlapped. Flowers piled up at the end of the gravel road. The Carter house was boarded up within days. By New Year's, the road looked almost normal again. Decorations were taken down, lights unplugged. Life resumed in the careful, subdued way it always does, after something unexplainable. But for those who lived there, Christmas never returned to what it had been. Every December after, the silence arrived early, and the smell of pine became unbearable. In the days that followed Christmas of 1978, Limestone County learned how quickly a place can be reduced to a headline. Reporters arrived from Birmingham, Nashville, even Atlanta. Satellite trucks lined Highway 72. Microphones were pushed toward faces that had no language for what had happened. Neighbors repeated the same phrases again and again. Quiet people, kept to themselves, never thought they were capable. The sheriff's department released statements carefully. There would be no charges. All suspects were deceased. The case technically was closed before the year ended, but nothing about it felt finished. Funerals blurred together. 9 services in 6 days. Churches overflowed, then emptied. Casseroles stacked up on kitchen counters, uneaten. Children were kept home from school until after New Year's. Parents drove them to bus stops instead of letting them walk. The gravel road became a place no one wanted to name. State investigators completed their review by mid-January. The findings were procedural, restrained, timeline reconstruction, ballistics confirmation, no evidence of outside involvement, no signs of intoxication. no criminal history that would have predicted the outcome. The official report avoided emotional language. Privately, deputies admitted the same thing. The violence had not been impulsive. It had been methodical. Shots were fired in a sequence that suggested planning. Targets were specific. Houses were approached in an order that followed the road logically, not randomly. No one was harmed who lived beyond a certain point. The Carters had stopped when they reached the last house connected, in their minds, to the offense. That detail unsettled investigators more than the number of dead. In Montgomery, state officials discussed whether the case indicated a broader issue: rural isolation, economic pressure, distrust of law enforcement. The conversation ended quietly. There were no funds, no programs, no public acknowledgement beyond condolences. 1978 was a year Americans wanted to forget. The decade had delivered Watergate, Vietnam, oil shortages, inflation. Trust in institutions was already thin. Stories like Limestone County's massacre didn't fit a narrative anyone wanted to confront, so the explanation hardened quickly. A family snapped. It was easier that way. The Carter house was demolished in February. County workers tore it down in a single day. The debris was hauled off. The land was left bare. No marker, no sign. Neighbors noticed the absence more than the structure had ever been noticed when it stood. Some families moved away that spring. Others stayed, bound by land they couldn't sell or memories they couldn't escape. The road never fully recovered its population. Children grew up hearing the story secondhand, stripped of detail, turned into warning. Don't take what isn't yours. Mind your neighbors. Some lines don't show until you cross them. The boy who had taken the Christmas tree left the county with his parents before the school year ended. His name would not appear in any official document connected to the case. Juvenile records were sealed. The detail remained a rumor, passed quietly, carefully. In newspapers, the story faded within weeks. By March, it was replaced by other tragedies, other crimes, other places. National attention moved on. Locally, it lingered. Every December, reporters would call the sheriff's office asking for comment. Each year, the response shortened. Eventually, there was none. The case became a footnote in criminal justice textbooks, cited briefly under discussions of family annihilation and collective grievance violence. It did not fit cleanly into existing categories. There was no manifesto, no ideology, no public declaration, just a sequence of decisions made inside a single house. Sociologists later pointed to the economic stressors of the late 1970s: rural unemployment, the collapse of small manufacturing, the erosion of informal community enforcement mechanisms. None of that comforted the families who remained. For them, the memory was not academic, it was sensory. The sound of gravel under tires at night, the sight of porch lights flicking on and off, the smell of pine in December. Some churches stopped encouraging live trees altogether, others didn't. There were no public memorials erected, no plaques, no official days of remembrance. The county chose silence, believing it was a form of respect. But silence did not erase the lesson. What the massacre revealed, uncomfortably, was how thin the barrier between normalcy and catastrophe could be, how quickly grievance could harden into certainty, how easily a community could miss its own warning signs because none of them seemed serious alone. A missing tree, a closed door, an unanswered knock. In the years that followed, deputies were trained to pay closer attention to domestic calls during the holidays. Clergy were encouraged to report prolonged absences. None of it was written policy, just quiet adjustments. By the early 1980s, new families lived along the road. They repainted houses, installed new mailboxes, raised children who knew nothing of what had happened there. Older residents watched them carefully, not out of suspicion, out of memory. The Carter name was not spoken often. When it was, conversations ended shortly after. History has a way of compressing events until they seem inevitable. But in Limestone County, those who lived through it knew the truth was smaller, sharper, and more disturbing. Nothing about December 1978 had required violence. No law had demanded blood. No authority had ordered retaliation. Everything that happened was chosen, and that knowledge, more than the deaths themselves, was what made the massacre impossible to forget. Because it meant it could happen again, anywhere, any year, under the right combination of silence, pride, and neglect. Christmas came and went in Alabama as it always did, but on that gravel road, winter never felt the same after. Not once, not ever. Officially, the The Limestone County case was complete by January of 1979. The files were boxed, labeled, and stored in a climate-controlled room in the courthouse basement. There they remained, untouched, except for occasional reference by academics or journalists looking for examples of familial violence. But outside the file cabinets, the story continued to live its own life. It survived in fragments. A deputy who responded that morning later admitted he hesitated before knocking on the Carter door. He said something about the house felt emptied out, like a place already finished with its purpose. That feeling never appeared in his statement. Another officer recalled noticing the sand in the Christmas tree stand before he noticed the empty gun cabinet. He couldn't explain why it stayed with him. He said it felt deliberate, a marker, not a mess. That observation was never recorded. Neighbors, too, remembered things they didn't share at the time. One woman confessed years later that she had found her gate open the night before the shootings and closed it without telling anyone. She assumed it was wind. When she heard the news the next morning, she understood the sound of boots in the gravel differently. A man admitted that he saw Thomas Carter near the road on December 22nd, holding a notebook. He assumed it was a grocery list. It was not recovered. Several residents recalled hearing what they believed were test shots late in the week before Christmas. Single cracks in the distance. They dismissed them as hunting. December in Alabama was hunting season. Normal explanations filled the gaps where concern should have gone. The most troubling details surfaced slowly. Years later, during interviews conducted by graduate students and independent researchers, patterns emerged that had not been obvious at the time. The Carters had not targeted randomly. They had avoided houses with extended families staying over for the holidays. Homes where relatives from out of state were visiting were passed by entirely. The victims were those who lived alone or in pairs. Adults, no children. That choice suggested awareness, control. The killings had not been fueled by chaos. Another detail rarely mentioned publicly was timing. The shootings occurred between 12:40 a.m. and 2:10 a.m. Based on shell casing analysis and neighbor reports, the Carters moved steadily, without rushing, spending several minutes at each location. There was no evidence of panic fire, no wasted ammunition. That fact unsettled professionals more than any other. The stolen Christmas tree remained central to the story, but the report framed it as a trigger, not a cause. Investigators suspected the offense reopened older wounds, long-standing slights, quiet exclusions, years of being tolerated rather than welcomed. The Carters were not invited to community gatherings. They were not asked to participate in holiday drives. They were spoken about, not spoken to. None of that justified what happened, but it explained how the grievance had found fertile ground. In one interview, a former pastor admitted he had noticed the Carters pulling away in the months before the massacre. He had considered visiting. He never did. It didn't feel urgent, he said. That sentence would appear repeatedly in different forms. Nothing felt urgent. The boy who took the tree carried the story with him into adulthood. He never spoke publicly. Friends later described him as cautious, withdrawn. He avoided Christmas decorations altogether. He did not attend any of the funerals. In private, he reportedly told one person that he had planned to return the tree the next day. He said he thought it would be funny. He said he didn't understand what he had touched. There was no space for that admission in any official narrative. The truth resisted clean packaging. Some locals insisted the Carters had planned something long before December. Others believed the massacre could have been prevented with a single conversation, a single knock on a door that went unanswered. Both interpretations lived side by side. By the mid-1980s, the road had a new name on county maps. The old designation quietly disappeared. Locals still knew where it was. They drove slower there. Every December, something small would resurface. A wreath placed anonymously at the edge of the woods. A candle left at the creek where weapons were found. No one claimed responsibility. Memory, like violence, did not require coordination. The case was occasionally cited in law enforcement training seminars as an example of grievance-based escalation. Slides showed timelines. Bullet points listed warning signs. But no slide could capture the atmosphere, the way silence thickened, the way normal routines became camouflage, the way a community mistook familiarity for safety. Those who lived through it learned a lesson that never appeared in any report. That harm does not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it waits, observes, collects small confirmations, and then moves, not in rage, but in certainty. The Limestone County Massacre remained officially solved, but understanding it fully proved impossible, because the most important elements were not physical evidence or ballistics. They were absences, the call that wasn't made, the question that wasn't asked, the moment that felt off but was dismissed. In the end, the story endured not as a warning about crime, but about attention, about how communities fracture quietly, and how easily a single thought, left unchallenged, can grow into something that erases 9 lives. By the time people realized what mattered, it was already too late. And Christmas, for those who remembered, became a season of listening more carefully, even to the things that said nothing at all. By the spring of 1979, Limestone County had returned to its routines. Fields were planted, schools reopened fully, shift whistles blew again at the poultry plants. On the surface, the county looked unchanged, as if December had been an interruption rather than a fracture. But interruptions leave residue. The gravel road where the killings occurred never regained its old rhythm. New residents came and went, but few stayed long. Those who did learned quickly that questions about the past were answered indirectly, if at all. People spoke in half sentences. They changed subjects. They looked away. The story had reached its final form, not the full truth, a version, one that allowed life to continue. In that version, the Carters were an anomaly, an isolated failure, a family that collapsed under pressure. The neighbors were unfortunate victims of randomness. That framing brought comfort, because if the event was random, it could not be anticipated. And if it could not be anticipated, no one was responsible for missing it. Privately, many knew better. Years later, a retired deputy described the case as the moment he stopped believing violence always announces itself. He said the warning signs had been everywhere, just quiet enough to ignore. A door that stayed shut, a man who stopped showing up, a grievance that seemed too small to matter. By the late 1980s, the massacre was rarely mentioned outside the county. When it was, it appeared as a brief reference in crime anthologies or academic papers. Dates, numbers, motive reduced to a sentence. The victims' names were not remembered beyond their families. The Carter's name became a local synonym for something unspoken. Christmas returned to Limestone County every year, but it changed shape. Live trees became less common on that road. Some families switched to artificial ones. Others stopped decorating altogether. No one coordinated this. It simply happened. Children who grew up there sensed something was wrong long before they understood why. They learned not to wander at night, learned that some houses carried stories you didn't knock on. Memory doesn't fade evenly. It thins in some places and hardens in others. In December of 1998, 20 years after the massacre, a short article appeared in the local paper. It ran on page 3. No photos, no interviews. Just a summary and a line noting that no memorial service was planned. The silence was deliberate. Those who remembered did not need reminders. The road still exists. The woods still stand. New pines have grown where the old ones were cut. From a distance, it looks peaceful, ordinary. That is the most unsettling part. Nothing about the landscape warns you. Nothing about the season does either. The massacre did not happen because of Christmas. It happened because of accumulation, of unspoken rules, of pride left unchecked, of the belief that silence keeps the peace. What December 1978 revealed was not a flaw unique to one family or one county. It exposed something broader, something uncomfortable, how easily isolation turns grievance into identity, and how quickly identity hardens into action when no one interrupts the process. No law was broken when the tree was taken. No alarm was triggered. No authority intervened. And yet 9 people died. The lesson is not about fear, it is about attention, about recognizing when ordinary things begin to feel heavier than they should, about understanding that violence does not always look violent at first. Sometimes it looks like withdrawal, like resentment, like a house with no lights on Christmas Eve. The story ends where it began, on a gravel road in Alabama, in winter. There are no final words from the dead, no confessions from the perpetrators, no clean moral, only the knowledge that this happened once and therefore can happen again. Anywhere, any year, if no one is listening. And that, more than the bloodshed, is what Limestone County learned too late.